Welcome back to another episode of Design to Convert, hosted by Replo. My name is Sanjay Jenkins, and today we have Ben Petraglia, Head of Strategy and Paid Acquisition at Accelerated Growth. Ben is also, and this is really, really awesome, he's also an investor in Replo. And today we're going to talk about his amazing journey in the DTC space as an operator and now being in the agency space as well, and running growth for brands. I think we're going to get a lot of interesting takes, both just like what it was like to build a brand from scratch, but also their holistic view of growth for their clients now. So Ben, thank you so much for joining us today on Design to Convert.
Awesome. Happy to be here.
So I want to go back to the very, very beginning of your career in DTC, because you have one of the most, I would personally say, iconic stories, but also just like a true grit, started from like nothing, reinvested all the profits, built something from the ground up, stories in the space. So much so that Shopify even has like a podcast and a blog post about all the work that you did on their website. So take us back to the start, and tell us about your first big foray into DTC.
Yeah. I'll actually take you a little bit before that, because before I got into DTC and started the brand side and started to move in that direction, I was actually pretty big in the blog space. So like if you go a bit further back, before the DTC got started, we were actually, my business partner at Soleil and I, we were running a music blog. And we were kind of understanding like the transformations in the digital blog space. This was again like 2007, 2008 when the music blog was up, and then like 2009, 2010 when we were doing Soleil. And like we were seeing like the music blog was really catching fire. We were like, why is this happening? We kind of like couldn't quite understand why so much traffic was coming to the blog organically. We were very new in the space. We were very young. And it was just a lot of like finding artists, publishing their music and getting recognition, and then like ranking organically for these artists that were up and coming when people were looking for their music. So we saw SEO as like a very big early opportunity, just from like a why is our music blog growing kind of way. And so, yeah, like the music blog was super fun. It was a passion of both of ours. And it led us actually to the place where Soleil got started. And so Soleil, for those of you not familiar, it's a direct-to-consumer bicycle brand. We ship bikes all over the United States, still operates today. There's a new team behind it now, after me and some of the other co-founders exited the business to private group. But yeah, so like we got started after the music blog. I was about a sophomore, junior in college, and we met the other founders from USC. We were at Chapman University in Orange County. And they were like, hey, we have this idea for this bike company, right? We maybe went out, we made like 10 bikes, we brought them back to the frat house, we gave them to our friends. And like, here's why we did it. There's like this huge problem where if like you want to get a bike, you have to go to the bike shop and you have to pay like, I don't know, a few $100, $500, $600, close to $1,000 for like a road bike or like a BMX bike or mountain bike. And then they were like, the other option is you go to a yard sale or Craigslist. I think Craigslist was around the time, and you buy a beach cruiser, and it's like a crappy bike and it gets stolen all the time and like blah, blah, blah. There's no middle ground. There was nobody shipping bikes direct to consumer. We didn't even think it could be done. We were like, how are we going to put this bike into a box, package it up and ship it to a customer where they can assemble it themselves without a bike shop? Like that in and of itself, figuring that out was a challenge for years. I mean, we never really like perfected it. There's still a learning curve when someone builds a bike for the first time, but we got it pretty close. So they had this idea for like, how do we digitize or serve direct to consumer this bike gap, the white noise in the bike marketplace. And so we were like, okay, we've been running this music blog and we've seen great success organically. How do we kind of marry these two ideas? And this was right around the time of like D2C kind of beginning. So like the Warby Parkers of the world, the Chubbies of the world, like those brands were just getting started. It's actually interesting. When we built our second website, we were using the same agency that Movement Watches was using, and they were just kind of doing their thing. Like all those brands were just starting to get started around the time that we really started to launch Soleil.
Was Movement down the street from y'all? They were in the general geographic area that you were
Yes.
in, right?
Yeah. It's actually really funny. One of my good buddies from Chapman, like grew up with Jake and those guys. So it's like a small world. I don't know them personally, but like he is one of their good buddies, and like kind of swap stories with him about how they went through it. And like, obviously we're using the same agency in San Diego at the time, and like just a small world back then. It's still a pretty small world, like a lot of the same providers, a lot of the same players, but it was a much smaller world back then.
So one of the things that I want to go into the music blog really fast. You built that on the back of like organic, like SEO, like a lot of content, and you pulled that. That's like one of the big pieces of knowledge and skill sets that you pulled into Soleil. Can you talk about how you developed, like how you, I guess, stumbled on that being the channel for, acquiring traffic and like how you developed that skill?
Yeah, I mean, when we saw the influx, like we had some basic analytic knowledge when we saw the influx of organic traffic coming off these keywords. For instance, we got invited to go cover a festival in New York called Governor's Ball. They still run it. This was the very first year that they ran it. And we saw, after we published like our recap, took some photos, videos, wrote like a recap of the artists we like, all of a sudden this Governor's Ball search term, like that traffic was coming into our blog to read that post. And we were kind of like, whoa, is it really that simple to just like publish content and then all of a sudden like traffic shows up? The answer is no. Like we found out that there was a little bit more to it, and back then there were also ways to manipulate the system. Like building link wheels still worked, like dispersing through like blog posts that had no social weight still worked, posting through Craigslist with a Craigslist bot still worked. Like all of that SEO juice was still out there. So like when we saw the organic opportunity, we became students of like, how are other people pushing this to the next level? And again, it was free. We were college kids. It was a bootstrap business. It was like, how do we acquire customers for free? And SEO was like the perfect answer. And if you listen to that Shopify podcast, like the complement to our SEO top of funnel strategy was our really tight middle of funnel email strategy. That Shopify podcast, I don't remember when it was published, but it was really about how we built like a fully robust nurturing system through email. So like if we were bringing in the traffic from SEO and organic for free, we were making sure we were converting them through our like educational email system, because it is like for a customer that doesn't know anything about bikes, one, and two, has never had a bike delivered to their house. It's a bit of a learning curve. So there's a lot of education that brings them over the finish line, middle, bottom of the funnel. So
talk us through, you guys have this idea at the frat. What frat were you in?
I wasn't in the frat. It was the other two co-founders at USD that were in the frat.
Gotcha. So yeah, talk us through like the aha of like, yo, we're gonna build bikes, and we're also gonna like have to figure out how to build bikes. Like what is that learning curve in 2009, 2010 look like?
So it was like there were always these like, they're all in any industry and any movement, there's always like the early adopters, like the trendsetters, right? So there were these trendsetters out there that were building these single gear bikes, right? They were taking old Schwinn bikes, like they were buying components from Japan. They were wrenching, like the gearhead guys, right? Like the hardcore guys. And we were watching them do this, and they were making these bikes that were like super low maintenance, super fun to ride, really cool and trendy. And we were like, okay, that's the bike we want to ride. We want to kind of like beef it up a little bit so it can handle college campuses, so you can beat the hell out of it. Like, we don't want it to be as performance as they're kind of building them to be, but that's the style of bike that we're going for. So we kind of learned from them, and like working with bike shops and like working with a few consultants who like were in the biking industry, like how to design and actually manufacture that style of bike, single gear, no gear shifter, like very low componentry, low maintenance. That's how the bike got made. Then packaging it and figuring out how to ship it was a whole nother ordeal. That's like a trial and error type thing. We had so many damaged shipments in the beginning. Like the spoke is tightened too much with a zip tie and it breaks the spoke, or like the wheel comes off and it pokes through the box. Like it was so much trial and error to get that right. We were fortunate enough to where we entered a business plan competition at USC and we won. And we got about 10 grand to like go to China, do all this R&D and like push the business forward. So like that's how we really kickstarted it. But it was a lot of working with like bike shops, gearheads to get the product right. And then like trial and error and working with the manufacturer to get the like boxing, shipping, and logistics right.
Do you remember the very first bike y'all put together?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's probably out there somewhere. I mean, there was so many iterations of it, right? Like, and then when we were expanding, like we were like, okay, we can't just make a single gear bike anymore. So then we had to make a 3-speed, and then we made like a step through for female. Like we made so many other iterations, and like each time we made a bike, it was a process. It was like, okay, what components do we want? How do we want to design it? What's the design inspiration? Are we working with a mechanical engineer? Like it was such a process to create a new bike. So it feels like the first bike happened like 4 or 5 times, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's it's such a magical thing. I imagine it's such a magical thing going through that iterative process, kind of building something completely from the ground up. All the while, you guys are students in college. Like we were talking right before we started recording. You said that you were a junior when this all started at Chapman. So walk us through what that was like, building this bike business and then simultaneously like being a student and a person, like a young person on campus.
Yeah. So the reason I actually went to Chapman was they have an entrepreneurship program. So like they have a special program you can go through for entrepreneurship where you get a well-rounded experience in all the aspects of business, from finance to marketing to operations, supply chain, like everything that you could want. And so there were a few other businesses that came out of that program as well. It was all kind of like, I think for some of the other guys, more of like a case study. Like, hey, we started this business as like a case study to take us through college. And like, we're going to kind of use that as like the thesis paper of our education, right? For us, it was kind of half and half. At first, we were like, okay, this is cool because like I'm studying this. I can use this as kind of my case study that's relevant to school. And then as it started to grow, it was like, okay, it's not a case study anymore. This is now a real business. And then the priorities started to shift. So like my senior year, it became like very difficult to continue like schoolwork. But since I was in this program, the professors were like very plugged in on like, okay, it's okay. We can like use this as like a work study, case study, whatever you want to use it as to like fill credits. And I was like, okay, that's great. And so like at that point, that was when we were like, going to China, missing class, going to big bike trade shows, like having meetings, like it was getting more real and like the business was growing, right? Like we couldn't keep bikes in stock, which ended up becoming like another problem. Because when a bunch of 23-year-old, 22-year-old kids walk into a bank, people are like, okay, yeah, what's going on here again? You want a couple $100,000 to finance inventory? And we're like, yeah, just give it to us. And then like, obviously we got some investors and we figured all that out. But yeah, it like started as like a tool within the education. And then it slowly became like trial by fire. This is your education now.
And throughout that period, what is like the one thing that when you wake up, you're like, oh man, I got to do this, or I like the driving force behind it all? Is it, we're going to go make like a bunch of money, or is it just, I love building bikes and selling them to strangers on the internet?
I'm like, and this is very much true in what we do at Accelerated today. I am personally just like a tinkerer. I'm like, what happens if we move this? What happens if we do that? Like, I just like to create things. And it's the same methodology that we put into Accelerated Growth Studio today. Like when we're looking at our client's business and we're like, okay, this metric, whatever that KPI is, seems a little bit off. How do we tinker it to try to like fix it? Like how, like for instance, if it's like a conversion rate issue within a certain funnel, it's like, okay, we want to just play with that conversion rate a little bit. What happens if we introduce a few experiments that can actually move that up into the right? So that's kind of the driving force for me, right? Like when I would wake up in the morning at Solid, I'd be like, okay, but what if we could unlock this new partnership with this blog where like we do this? Like what kind of impressions and eyeballs would that put on the site? Like just like a natural tinkering mentality and a creation mentality. Like we just love to create, and that's really what drives me.
And like you're you're doing all these things. So you've got these money coming in from like the pitch competition that you won.
It's coming in and going out. Bikes are a very expensive thing to manufacture. So like when you're bringing containers of bikes in at a time, 2,000, 3,000 bikes on like a 40 high cube, it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So like, I don't think I paid myself more than $500 until 4 years in, five years in, you know, like all of that money that came in had to go right back out until we started to take on some investment, until we built up the credibility with the banks. And like, it was just a very cash in, cash out, cash flow was very challenging for us.
So as a combative measure, or just kind of like a counter agent to the high cash involved in just operating the business, right? Inventory, shipping. Did you charge customers for shipping back then?
So there was a shift. Like it started at flat rate $20, and then it went to free. Like as the Amazon Prime started to influence every customer in their shipping consideration. So like we kind of had to keep up with that, and like we played around with our margins, and the margins were pretty good, but like the shipping costs, we made some warehouse 3PL switches that like really helped manage those. So we had to eventually eat those, but at $25, it actually wasn't bad. We could ship basically break even on the West Coast, and we lost a little bit of money on the East Coast when we were just getting started. Yeah.
And so that's going like some sort of ground, like FedEx or UPS ground.
Yeah, we were just under like the balloon charges. Like the box size was just under that. So we got away with it for years. And I don't think anymore. I think now that has changed. But yeah, it's been a few years since I left the business. I don't know as much these days.
I in 2020, I ran growth for a company called Buff City Soap, and we were shipping soap, and soap is relatively dense. And then on top of that, our best-selling product was laundry soap, which is even more dense. And so I got like a master class in like shipping optimization, learning what like dimensional weight is, which is not just how much the thing actually weighs, but like the size of the box. Well, it's, you know, because that all factors in. Do you remember? Did you handle like, you know, when a carrier is on the line trying to like get rates? Or are you trying to get rates for carriers? Was that you, or was that someone else on your team that managed that?
We have another guy on the team that was the CEO and still runs the business today. That's like operations and logistic and finance guy. He's really good with all of that stuff. I mean, I do think still to this day that like growth and operations and merchandising need to speak. Like you need to understand like if there are operational efficiencies that allow you to increase your CAC targets, decrease your CAC targets, like those conversations need to happen. Especially as it relates to like LTV and like where those shipments are actually going out. Mm-hmm. Like are our CAC targets different for different geographical regions based on those cost inputs, or are they different based on LTV inputs? Like those conversations I think do need to happen a lot more than maybe they do. Which is why we try to have a lot of those conversations with our clients now.
Nice. So, you know, going back to just how much cash is required to operate this business, you said towards the beginning that you wanted to figure out a way to get customers pretty much for free, and SEO is the way. And looking at the Shopify article and podcast, you know, the biggest thing that, you know, the headline there is, this is how this company sells 15,000 bikes a year using content. So how did you, in the early days, use like organic content that you were making to sell these bikes and get like a functionally zero CPA?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll talk about kind of the life cycle of the business and the CPAs and the CACs and all that stuff. But early on, it was very similar to the music blog, but like very much so amplified. So we used a lot of SEO tactics, and we were very good for ranking for bike in X. So bike in Tallahassee, Florida, bike in enter any geolocation. We were very good for ranking for those keywords with content. And then in that content, it was like looking for the best bike in X. We deliver to your neighborhood for this flat rate cost, cheaper than the bike shop comparison. So that was like a big part of the strategy for a long time, was ranking for like bike in X or bike for sale in X. And we were really able to nail in those geos and get a ton of customers for free. And then we started to like disperse that content through like Craigslist bots. So we used to like go and use Craigslist bots to like flood the search results in any of those neighborhoods, Tallahassee, Brooklyn. We started to track like which neighborhoods were performing better than others. Brooklyn was a great neighborhood for us. We still have a ton of bikes there. We actually had a shop there for a little bit too. So then we would go and like use the bot to like disperse a bunch of postings for our content in Craigslist Brooklyn, right? So it was things like that to like build that search velocity around bike in or bike for sale in, and then enter geo. And then when they hit the site, we had content experience to drive them to make that purchase decision.
So one of the things that I've heard over the last few years in the DTC space is, oh, like SEO doesn't really work for e-commerce, or oh, SEO doesn't really work for DTC specifically. And you obviously flipped that. I mean, well before anyone was even saying that too. Like you built an entire business on it. What do you, when a client comes to you today and you're talking to them about SEO, how do you approach that conversation knowing what you know?
Well, this was probably like 500 Google algo changes ago. Like this was way back in the day. And like we saw the tectonic shift that Google made to like deprioritize organic results for paid results, right? They give up so much of that search engine result page now to paid units, as opposed to where it used to be mostly trafficked by organic. So like even the search visibility now leans more heavily paid, but then they're like also throttling like the organic reach and content. And there's been tons of changes. So it's not as big of a player for most brands as it used to be. I've seen it work well in the last 5 years in like the skincare space in a really interesting way for a brand that we worked on. And we kind of have these conversations on the upfront, right? Like when we onboard a brand, we talk through a few scenarios. And one of the scenarios is like, where do we think our paid versus organic acquisition percentages are going to be? Like, how is your model built to support that? Like, do we think we're going to be driving 60% through paid, 40% through organic? Like, what does that split look like? And then how does that relate to like your CAC to LTV or whatever other metrics you're tracking, contribution margin, whatever the metric is. And I agree that not all brands are going to be able to win on SEO. Like there's not everybody is going to be able to prop up an SEO strategy and win. Like some brands, it's just, they're too niche or their market's too competitive. Like a high-end fashion is going to have a hard time winning on SEO, right? But what the skincare blog was, or not skincare blog, skincare client was very good at doing is they had a blog section that addressed all of the skincare home remedies. So it was a wrinkle reduction product, and their blog section was like, any search query that people had for like how to reduce wrinkles with papaya extract, how to reduce wrinkles with oatmeal at home, like all of those search queries they would go after. And then they would educate in the content the consumer on like one, how to try that at home, but then two, why their product actually was better and more efficient than that. And they used to generate, I think like 40, 50% of their sales through that SEO strategy. And it's not, half of it is ranking for the keyword, right? Like I have another client now in the pet space. And like we look at some of their competitors, and their competitors are ranking for like pet related injury, and they sell a joint enhancement supplement to try to like make the pet's joints stronger. But their content doesn't do, although it's ranking, it doesn't do a great job of convincing the customer why the pet joint is actually preventative. So like that's what the skincare blog did very well. Company did very well with their blog. They not only captured that intent, they ranked for those keywords for people that are looking for the home remedy, but the content was performance enough to be able to tell the customer why their product is better, and then eventually get them into the funnel. And we used to design email capture specific to each of the blog articles. So like if someone came in off the search for papaya serum at home, we would have an email flow and an email capture that would be like, want to learn why X product, and want to name the product, is better than papaya serum? Sign up here. And then they would go into a flow where we would educate them based on that. So like we were very tactical in like not only getting stuff to rank, but educating the consumer.
I think a lot of folks maybe try to do the first part where they start building the content. But it's that second piece of having the email capture and the flow that's also tuned to that context that I think really sets you apart. And you mentioned before we started recording, I think that was also another thing that you did at Soleil that you were very good at. You had this amazing organic top of funnel, but then you really cleaned up in your email middle of funnel.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit?
I think I haven't mentioned this on the podcast yet, but we built one of the first 1,000 Shopify stores, and we were one of the first 25 Klaviyo accounts. So like
wow.
Yeah. And that's why I've always been so interested in Replo, is because, again, I'm a tinkerer. I like to use tools. I like to try things. So like for us, those tools were game changers, right? And then like, for instance, Replo for our clients now, it's made the landing page experience and the landing page testing so much more seamless. So like that was when we moved to Shopify, and that also was like the dawning of our paid customer acquisition when we moved to Shopify. But when we moved to Shopify and we had Klaviyo integrated, that was a game changer for our email program. When we were using MailChimp and WordPress, which was the early days, we were just kind of hacking it together as best we could based on like where a user was coming in from a URL perspective, and like drip campaigns and like these really automated, robust things. I would give them like a C- or a D compared to what we can do now, but they were good. They were better than like most other people were doing.
What was Klaviyo like? As like the first 25 customers, because
we didn't know if it was going to work. Yeah. We were like, is this thing gonna break? We had no idea what to expect. And they were like, but we integrate directly to Shopify. And we were like, yeah, but what does that mean? And like, they didn't have really at the time a good way of like educating us of like, oh, but there's all these powerful inputs that you can now like trigger off of or segment off of or manipulate however you want to manipulate with these inputs. They were probably also building a lot of those inputs still. Like the integration to Shopify probably wasn't as foolproof back then as it is now. So it was just like a better MailChimp was the pitch. Like a better MailChimp that integrates directly to your Shopify, but we're not telling you what you can do with that integration yet. And then like slowly as we learn the tool, as anyone learns a new platform, we started to see all the bells and whistles. We started to ask for features. We started to like grow with them the same way we did with Shopify. And it allowed us to do so much, especially as we rolled out new SKUs, like a choose which bike is right for you feature, and like those experiences to educate on like which bike is which and why. Those features were all done with Klaviyo integration, knowing what products people are looking at, knowing where people are coming in from, like any of the segmentation we can do in there now. One of the biggest things that was early on the Klaviyo side, which was always a struggle for us, is which size am I? Because the bikes are sized. Like you can't just buy like small, medium, large. You have to buy it like kind of based on how tall you are. So we built a lot of web functionality to correct that in the move to Shopify. Like a type in your height and will actually tell you the size. That still exists on the site today. But we did a lot of that education through the early Klaviyo flows too. Like when someone signed up to the welcome series, we would have them input like a little bit of data about themselves in like the updating form. And then we would be able to recommend them which size that they would need.
And I'm imagining that a lot of the recommendation stuff, like now we're spoiled with, recommendation engines and ML, AI stuff, but you were probably the recommendation engine back in the day. You were manually setting all this stuff up, right?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. The fact that it was automating the responses was enough for us. We just had to manually set up what those responses were going to be.
Sure. So you mentioned that when you transitioned from WordPress MailChimp over to Shopify Klaviyo, that kicked off your paid acquisition. Had you done paid before, or was that the first time you'd ever done it in your life?
We had not done paid before, to answer the question. We had explored a bunch of other channels that outside of just SEO on the organic side that had provided like really good uptick for us. We worked with a PR agency for a while. They put us in front of influencers when influencers were just becoming a thing. We worked with blogs. We worked with festivals, events, out of home stuff. Like we did a really good job on the organic side. And then when we moved over to Shopify, which is when we were building some of those sites with the same guys or the same agency as the Movement guys, we kind of like started to hear about Facebook ads. We heard through the grapevine, like one of my old business partners at Sender, my last agency, was actually at Chubby's at the time. And he was like, hey, or no, sorry, he was at Levi's at the time. He was like, hey, Facebook came to us and we can like run these like campaigns now. So we can like buy people to like our page, and like they know about us now and they can continue to grow the brand. And I was like, we're just going to buy likes for the Facebook pages? Yeah, that's what they recommend. It's the best in class. Just the reps are recommending it. And so that was like the first we heard about it. It wasn't right for us yet. Again, we were like a cash constrained business. Cash flow was always a problem. So like the more organic use we could get, the better, until we moved to Shopify, until we moved to Klaviyo. And then we did take on a little bit of friends and family money, and the banks were working with us now, and it started to grow. So that was when we first like started to hear about paid. And it was primarily Meta first, Facebook first back then. And then a little bit of Google outside of that. It was interesting. We didn't see the opportunity at Google sooner. Like knowing what I know now, if I was like, hey, we're like put apples and apples together. If we're doing really well on organic SEO, we should probably try some paid Google. But instead we were like, oh, what's this Meta Facebook thing everybody's talking about? Like these movement guys are crushing it on there. My other buddy's talking about it. Like we want to try that. So we went like right there first as the first strategy.
Do you remember the first ad you ran?
No, I remember the first one that was like semi-successful, but I don't. It was like an unboxing video in stop motion of like the bike coming apart and coming back together into the box. It was like a simple
nice.
So people could see how easy it was to put together, which was the biggest piece of feedback that we got from customers. It was like, we don't know how to build it. I'm sure our first ad was like a text-based ad, or like a very simple static with like an image of like a hot girl on a bike, because times were different back then, and that was how people used to advertise. So like, yeah, I'm sure it was something corny like that. But the first like really successful ad for us was like that unboxing ad. And we didn't build a business off paid. We never were like a big player in the paid space. Now the paid is a much higher percentage of customer acquisition, but we were just such a big organic business that like paid was just a complement to that. And like, if we could get a couple conversions out of there, great. We never hired an agency to do paid while I was there. I did all the paid. It wasn't the biggest part of our strategy. Now it's a different story. A lot of clients, like, they rely much more heavily on paid to get started because organic is much tougher. It's much tougher now.
But I would imagine it's a bigger moat if you can get it right on the organic side.
The best clients we work with are the ones that come to us. We just had one of these like last week, 2 weeks ago that we kicked off, and they're like, "Hey, Mike Gardner's here. I don't know if you can hear that in the background." They're like, "Hey, we're a brand. This is what we do. We have a pretty good organic following. We're doing like 20,000, 30,000 a month organically, and like people love the product." And I look in their social channels and I look at like what they're doing, and customer feedback's great. They truly have what I think a lot of brands don't have, is like product market fit, and they actually solve a customer need. We have evolved in this situation now where like we think we solve a customer need, but like, do we actually? But anyway, like this organic brand, they come to us, they're like, we're ready to turn on paid. We've kind of tapped out everything we can do organically, and we're ready to try on paid. And like within 7 days, we were generating 2x ROAS and spending $5,000 a day. It was like, it's so easy when a brand has product market fit, clear direction, good design, and good organic traction to like, one, come in and make it work on paid profitably. And then two, just supplement what they've already built on organic with hyper growth on paid. And then you'll start to see organic catch up. And that's kind of like what we work on next. It's like, okay, paid's it's a machine. It's working. We know what ad creatives, landing pages, formats are working. And like, we're always going to try to tweak it up, get incremental gains, get better, smarter, faster. But like, what can we switch back, focus on the organic side to try to continue to keep that balance where it needs to go, and like look for those opportunities.
I want to ask just one more question about Soleil before we transition over to more of the work that you're doing now, as you just described. And it's how much of a did you guys have a cult following in Venice or just in, Southern California? Like how much of the community did you engage in when you were building this brand?
That was huge. That was our differentiator as competitors entered the marketplace. So when competitors entered the marketplace, there were a bunch of guys that came and they were doing the same thing, making a very similar bike. Alibaba was popular now, as still is today with some people. So they were just ripping us off, making a similar bike and trying to undercut price. And we were like, okay, like we're not going to race to the bottom. That's not what we want to do. It's not who we are. It's not the fight we want to get into. How can we differentiate this product in a way to keep it relevant now that the market has changed? And so we looked at all these competitors and we were like, would you ride any of these bikes? Like we were talking to ourselves. We were like, would you ride any of these bikes? And we were like, no, they're like ugly and like there's no brand behind it. It's just like a knockoff top Alibaba that they're selling for $100 less than we are. So we were like, okay, what makes our bikes unique? And then it was like, we're pretty unique people. So like, I think it's our eye for design and like the culture in which we kind of immersed ourselves. So at that point, we decided that like it was more than the bike and it was really about the lifestyle that the bike could unlock for you. It was about riding down the Venice Beach Boardwalk. It was about riding to go have a beer with your friends at a bar down the street after you've had a surf. It was more about that. And we wanted to show everybody our community that we had here. So like we had a super cult following in Venice. Like we have a shop here. We still have a shop here. We all lived here. So like we built this community here and then we brought that online. So we started to work. This was one of our best organic channels outside of SEO. We started to work with DJs. I don't know if you saw this on the website. If you go to the website, there's still something called the Fix Tape, which is like a mixtape for like people that ride fixed gear bikes. We would do one once a month as a content play. And the only way you could download the mixtape was if you joined our email list. So we used it as like a growth hacky way for big DJs. Like we had some big players to publish this on SoundCloud where we get hundreds of thousands of plays and views. But the only way their fans could download it was if they navigated back to our site and joined the email list. And the DJs were just psyched to be a part of the community. It started to gain traction. They loved the bikes. Like Diplo brought the bikes to Burning Man. Like it was like a whole thing that like just kind of grew. And so we had this huge community and cult following, not only in Venice, but in like the DJ scene and like the cool kids kind of scene, just because like we were authentic and organic. We weren't just out here trying to make a quick buck. Like we were really trying to build something that I think a lot of people weren't thinking about. And I think that's one of the reasons it's still relevant today.
How does that spirit of not wanting to make a quick buck, wanting to build something that lasts and engages people translate into the work that you do now?
That's I think important. Like most of the clients, I mean, there's a few things. One, internally to our agency, that is not our motif and objective. We don't work with anyone. Like we don't just take any client if we don't think they can win. We don't have a sales team. We're not out there just publishing case studies that we 10x somebody's ROAS and running Facebook ads against it and trying to get leads. Not what we do. We're not about making a quick buck. We're in it for the long term. And I coach everybody on my team to like always do something that's in the best interest of the client, even if it's not in the best interest of the agency. Like we'll figure it out on the back end. Like if we lose a little bit of profitability, but the client is going to continue to win, that's what we do, right? And a lot of the brands we do work with, because we are selective, are brands that will be around for 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe more years, and that are in it for the right reason. Like that brand I was just telling you, that organic brand that was doing really well. It's a great story about like a female founder who found herself drinking way too many Negronis during the pandemic and was like, I'm sick of drinking Negronis. Like I'm sick of drinking alcohol all the time. Like there has to be a better alternative. So she went out and like formulated a non-alc version of the Negroni and brought it to market and like was super excited to share it with everybody. And she's like dressed up in fun costumes and like handing it out to people. And it's like, it's very authentic to who she is. And when she came to us, I was like, of course, this is exactly what we want to work on, right? Like you're in it for the long haul. You're not trying to make a quick buck. And this is you personified as a brand. So that is a lot of the work we do now, is like fulfilling and working with brands that get it.
And one of the things that I pulled out from the way that you talk about how you engage clients and the kinds of clients you work with is that you have a very holistic approach to the work that you do. It's not just we're going to run Facebook ads and 10x your business through like a 5 ROAS or whatever. It seems that you also think through every aspect of growth, like all the different levers and then the implications within the business. Is that a pretty accurate assessment?
Totally. That's how we think 100%. I mean, when we talk to a client for the very first time, the first thing I ask is like, where are you at and where do you want to go? Not what is your ROAS goal, not what's your monthly budget, not any of those questions. It's like, where's your business at current state and where do you see it going? Do you see it being nationwide in every store? Do you see it being like a household name? Do you see it being 10x on revenue this year? Like, where do you see it going? And then that's how we craft the strategy based on their response. It's like, okay, we're here and we want to get to here. I'm like, okay, let me look through your metrics, your analytics, where the brand is at currently, and put together what channels, strategies, activations we need to get there. And then every week when we show up to report to the client, it's not just like, here's what we spent and here's what we got in return. It's here's how your business is moving towards that goal. Monthly, weekly, daily, quarterly. Here's how we are on track from every channel, from the top down holistically, moving towards your desired outcome.
And being a lean team, I would imagine that you can't do everything under the sun as it relates to growth. So what are like the key areas that you focus on when you work with your clients?
So the way we kind of think about growth is basically 5 components. Like we kind of have it bucketed into 5 components. The strategic growth consulting component, which is like, again, where are you at? Where do you want to go? Let's look at your contribution margins. Let's look at your LTVs. Let's like dive into the nuts and bolts of like the actual business ecosystem. Then there's the customer acquisition side, customer retention, creative strategy and production, web optimization. That's really like the bare bones 5 pieces to the engine. There's a bunch of like organic and owned channels and paid channels, and all the channels kind of fall into those 5 pieces. We own growth strategy, the top componentry. We own customer acquisition primarily. There are a few agency partners we have under customer acquisition and a few strategic media partners we have under customer acquisition. We have solution for retention to get you to a certain level. A lot of clients these days are bringing retention in-house. So we kind of bridge the gap between like the client bringing retention in-house. And then creative and web is not something we do. So like we will advise the creative partner, and we have creative partners that we can tack on. We have an agency partner that's just like creative strategist, creative production team, creative, like they just plug in and they handle that. And then we have web agencies and other agencies as partners for that stuff too. And we direct. We're like, okay, cool. From the strategic consulting arm, like we have this new intro bundle. We want to test this intro bundle to see the LTV and the conversion rates and the AOVs of like this intro offer bundle. So we'll communicate that to creative. Like, here's how we want to speak about it. Here's the messaging. Here's how we want to talk about it. Creative will put their strategy arm on top of it, produce the content, edit the content, try some different hooks, some different copy variations. We'll buy the media. We'll kind of look at the data together and kind of decide where to go from there. Also goes to web, where web is like, we'll put together the bundle on site. We'll get the product SKUs, UPCs, like SEO work, whatever needs to get done back end. And then there's like the handoff of like what we can now do in house with Replo, which is like, we want to build our landing page strategy around that, which doesn't require their web team. As long as the product exists, like, and the Shopify functionality and upsells and cross sells, rebuy carts, one-click upsells, all of that stuff is handled by web. We come in and we're like, okay, we can use Replo to spin up what the landing page strategy is going to be. And we've been getting a lot tighter on like functionally what that looks like and how we've been using Google Optimize until it's sunsetted. to roll out like a pretty robust landing page testing infrastructure. And then like, obviously we do a little bit of light CRO once we find the winning page. And Replo has been like a key component of us building that strategy.
What was, and I asked this selfishly, what was your aha moment when you used the Replo platform?
It was really, I think, a few things. One, the Shopify integration, like being able to seamlessly have imports of products, imports of CDN stuff from Shopify, like bring all that stuff over into our environment that we're designing in super easily. And then be able to publish it out within one click onto our Shopify store as a page. Like if I duplicate a page and change a section and click publish, it's a page in our Shopify store, and I can optimize A/B test between the two pages now. Like that was super great for us to be able to move very quickly. And then the drag and drop functionality, like we are Figma people. So like anything that's close to Figma in terms of a web builder, like code free, frictionless, makes it really easy for our team to go in there and play around. So it's kind of the aha moment was like, we rolled out a client landing page, and I'll just give you one more bit of information before I talk about this. When I was at agency side, after I had my exit from Soleil, I went to work at a bigger agency because I wanted to see what an agency was like. It was very hard to sell clients landing pages because we were like, hey, trust us. This is what you need. It's going to work, but it costs money. And so like the client would instantly be like, do you know it's going to work, or are you selling this to us? Like what's really happening here? Because like the agency game, I think, is a little bit notorious for like a cash grab, depending on what agency you're at. And so like what Replo has allowed us to do now too is like mitigate that conversation a lot, because we can do all of that work internally, and there's not a need for like a big expensive landing page package that you have to buy through our agency. The tool has really allowed clients with smaller budgets that are just kind of getting started to test landing pages where they wouldn't be able to have tested them in the past. I'm like, you got a designer? They're like, yeah. I'm like, here's the brief. Just make it for me in Figma. I'll get it into Replo in 2 days and we'll be good to go. So it's like, it's made our lives a lot easier, and we feel like way less cash grabby about it now. And the risk on the client side is gone, which is great.
That's awesome. I mean, that obviously gives me the warm fuzzies. I'm so grateful that you're such a big proponent of the tool, but in addition to being a proponent, you are actively in it building. And I also see like we track like who's building what, how many edits are they making. So I see your team in there, and so it's really nice to see that and hear that. In the spirit of, you were early Shopify, early Klaviyo users, and you worked with us on the feedback, and this can be fun because it's a relatively public forum here. What's the one thing, and it's April 2023, what's the one thing that we could improve upon, or what's the next thing you'd like to see from us?
I mean, the biggest question is like, when Optimize goes away, what's going to happen, right? Like, are clients going to have to start paying for an Optimizely or VWO, or like, what's going to happen there? So like, if there is a way to have any built-in split testing or reporting tools within the Replo platform, that would be like incredible for us, because I think a lot of people are asking themselves like, what are we going to do when Optimize is gone now? Like, where are we going to go? We have no home, or we have to pay for a home. So that would be like the one thing that I say, like, it would be like amazing to have any kind of split testing capabilities or data and reporting on insights within the Replo platform, so it's all housed in one place. I think the same goes for like heat mapping and like user recordings. Like, if we could plug in our Hotjar stuff into the same UI, or Lucky Orange, or whoever you use for that stuff, Clarity, if it could all live in like the same UI, where we could see like, here's insights on how the page is performing, here's the page where we can build it, and then here's how we can split test it and read data on it in one roof, that would be like amazing for us.
That's that last piece that you mentioned, like bringing it all in house. I think that's like so we talk about analytics and the split testing thing on a near daily basis, or at least several times a week. And it is so important. Obviously, like, we're counting down the days to Optimize being sunsetted. So we hear you. Definitely something we're actively working on. And I think there's a lot of stuff that we want to like make sure we get right. But I think the piece that I'm going to take back to the team, and obviously the world is going to hear this now too, is that piece of like trying to bring all that stuff like under one roof. Because it's one thing to have the data. It's you want to be able to actionize the data, but you also want to be able to actionize it quickly. Like I think a big part of any tool, like the value of any tool, is how quickly can you actually like derive value from it. And so every little thing that we can do to kind of make that faster. And on the building side, like I know some of the Replo AI stuff that we're working on, making it easier for people to spin up landing pages, it automatically generates sections, things like that. That is a step in, time to value. But the analytics piece is like, I think that's a big piece. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And it is something that we're working on. And we want to make sure that we get that right. So sweet. Thank you for sharing that. And we're coming up close to time. And I don't want to, run you too long, because I know it is Ben's birthday today. He is so gracious with his time. And talking is,
but that means I got no other meetings, because I told everybody else it was my birthday.
Super open. I've got 3 questions for you before we part ways today. And one of them is going to be weird, maybe. The second one's going to be business related, and the third one is going to be kind of more personal. And the first
There's no such thing in my world as weird. So
okay, well, I love it. So at the start of this, you kind of showed me around your room, and you showed me, your surfer accoutrement, as you said. What is something that you learned being a surfer that has made you a better business person?
It's a little bit of being a surfer, and it was a little bit of these guys that I worked with that were like insane media buyers. But it's like the ability to just, because I'll explain it in surfing terms first, and then we'll talk about it. If you're surfing like a pretty big and consequential wave, and like you get a hold down, like you get smashed to the bottom, and like you feel like all the air is coming out of your body and you can't breathe, and etc. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. But if you freak out and start to try to fight it and fight your way to the top, that's when it becomes dangerous, because your body like lets so much oxygen out as you try to swim to the top. And your body's natural fight or flight reaction is like, oh my God, I'm drowning. Like I need to go to the top. So like you have to learn over years to like quiet your mind, kind of go to this happy place and like just ride it out, like make calculated decisions, figure out where your board's at, figure out if your body's okay, make sure you're not hitting the reef, but quiet your mind and be like, we're going to get through this, and then we're going to come out on the other side. And I worked with these really great media buyers in New York for a bunch of years. One of them is a guy called Michael McTeague, who I'll shout out by name. He was the head media buyer at Bombas for a long time. And then Daniel Diaz, who runs an agency called Social Bulldog. He's an ex-Facebook guy, also a really great guy on the Facebook media buying side. And one of the things that they always echoed to me when like we were buying like a lot of media and like we would have a bad day, it was like, okay, we got to kind of like take a step back, take a deep breath. Don't turn your campaigns off. Don't freak out. Quiet your mind, make smart and calculated decisions, and get ready for the next go. Get ready to swim back up to the top. So like the ability to be less reactive, 1, to client pressure. Why is today upside down? And then 2, when like a day goes upside down, being able to step back from it and like tactically dissect where it went upside down. Where is the break? Why is it breaking? And how do we calmly come back up to the surface, communicate to the client, fix it, and move on? Those guys were really good at that. And surfing has taught me a lot about that as well.
I've never surfed. I'm not much of a board person, just by nature of lack of practicing balance, is how I'll phrase it. But I think what you described of like being held down, I think we can all like professionally relate to that in some ways. I know I do, and my mind goes to some specific instances and places. So obviously the practice of surfing helps you quiet your mind, because it is to a certain degree life and death. are there things that you do outside of being on the board that help you reinforce that or like practice that skill?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, like even in the day to day, like when the wave is coming and whatever that wave could be, you know, like client problems, inventory problems, like the wave is coming, right? And that's practice to be like, okay, let's just quiet our minds. Let's figure out why. The why is like, that's the whole thing here is like when your mind is racing and you're in fight or flight, you can't think clearly enough to figure out the why, right? You're like breathing heavy. You have no idea what's going on. You're angry. You're like smashing the keyboard. To get away from that and to like actually take a look in as to why this wave is here and what's happening, and then dissect and correct it. I mean, obviously I do yoga as well. Like it's a good way to get the practice going. Take a lot of walks during the day. It's another good way to really do it. So yeah, that's like the big thing. My big takeaway is like quiet the mind and actually dissect a problem instead of like fight or flight, freak out, and like try to smash the keyboard until the problem's gone.
Sure. I love that. I'm probably going to go for a walk after this. Just I think that's it's actually like a great like reminder to do so. The second question that I have is related to business and more specifically, like if you were advising someone who's just getting started in their brand, they've come up with this idea for a product, they've built a brand, and they're about to start their go-to-market. What is the philosophy that you would impart on them, or like the 30,000 foot perspective that you would give to them, having been on the journey of building, you know, multiple companies from the ground up, and you know now like advising clients yourself?
There's really two. One of them is a really interesting like baseball reference that I talk to clients about all the time. And it's about like the concept of having an at-bat, right? If you're launching your brand, you're going to take an at-bat. There's going to be a pitch and you're going to have to take a swing at it, right? So like if there are things we can do, reading the pitcher's body language, studying the pitcher in like pre-game tape. I never played baseball, so I don't know why this is a relevant topic for me to talk about, but anything we can do to help us understand how that pitch is going to come over the plate so we can better hit it. That's what I coach my clients to do. So like if we can run dark tests, if we can get in front of customer surveys, if we can put an ad into a forum to get ripped apart, if we can do like an audit page teardown, if there are things we can do before we start to go out there and try to put our brand out into the world to give ourselves the best chance to hit the pitch, do those. Don't go crazy and be like, we can't launch for a year because everything's wrong, but just try to give yourself as much data and real-time customer feedback. Another one is like, sometimes we can't see the forest through the trees. So like people around you aren't going to be the best people to give you feedback on your product. You are not going to be the best person to give you feedback on your brand. Like put it out there, get some eyeballs on it and get some data back and be like, okay, am I giving myself the best chance to hit this pitch? Right? That's the one piece of advice. The more upfront work, the better. And then the second is like, people say this one all the time, but I don't know if anyone actually believes it. Like, don't be afraid to fail. Like, I'm going to mess up 9 out of 10 things I'm going to do today. You know, like we all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. You don't always hit the pitch. Sometimes you hit a foul ball. Like, don't expect that everything you're going to do is going to be perfect and beat yourself up over it, because that's where like I see a lot of brands like go wrong. Like they come out with their first pitch. And I have a client that did this, right? Like, they came out with their first swing. They positioned the product in a way in which it didn't resonate at all. And when I started to talk to them, I was like, they were so defeated. They were like, we went on Shark Tank and the sharks told us no, the product didn't resonate at all. Like, it was hard to build any traction. Like, they were so defeated and they were like, we don't know what to do. And I was like, don't blame yourselves. You know, like we just need to keep trying and we need to try something new. You can't try the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. That's a very constant principle. So I was like, don't give up. don't beat yourself up. It's not your fault. Let's retool and try again. And we retooled it. We repositioned it. It was a good product. They believed in it. We just needed to communicate it a little bit differently to the customer. And like the success, it's night and day, not only from a profitability and contribution margin and CAC perspective, like acquiring the customer, but the resonance, the LTV, the way people use the product, it was night and day from where they were 2 years ago when we started working together. So yeah, the two big ones are like, give yourselves the best chance to hit the pitch, spend the extra money and the extra time to get some other eyeballs on it. And then if you don't hit the pitch, don't beat yourself up about it.
Amazing. And the last question that I have for you before we part ways today is, there's a frame that I want to add based on some of the, I ask this question quite regularly now. And the frame that I want to impart before I ask the question is, giving the answer, not necessarily about your own journey, but like if someone were to embark on the journey of building DTC. And the question is, knowing what you know now, what would you go back to your starter self? Maybe it's the start of Soleil or the music blog. Knowing what you know now, what would be the one key piece of advice that you would give yourself?
It's still something I'm kind of bad at doing, but I'm trying to get better. And it's not to be so cynical of like SaaS. So like I have this really bad, obviously when you're a brand owner, when you're on the brand side, you get 150 to 200 emails a week from somebody trying to sell you SaaS. And you're like, okay, everybody's got the snake oil. Everybody's got the magic silver bullet to fix XYZ problem. And so you just push everybody to the side. You're like, okay, I can't decipher. Like the BS radar doesn't work anymore. I don't know what's good and what's fake. So back at Soleil, we used to or even 2 years ago, we used to look at some SaaS and be like, we won't even test it. Like, it's not even worth us trialing it. So like, if I could go back and tell myself to like, think about it a little bit differently, think about the time to value trade-off, set a structured experiment. We expect this platform to produce X outcome, Y outcome, whatever the outcome is going to be, and then go and test a few things that actually are going to solve pain points. That would be my recommendation. I've always been the guy that's like, I got to move that rock over there and I don't trust this dolly. I'm just going to pick it up and move it. But like, maybe I should trust the dolly a little bit more. And we found some great success with tech partners that like, I got their first email and I was like, this snake oil salesman is like, there's no way. Like, there's no way. And I just wrote it off. And then like, as I've kind of coached myself, to be a little more accepting, set up experiments, analyze where the actual pain point is and see if this product can solve the pain point. We've gone back to some of those partners and some of them have been game changers for what we're doing.
That's amazing. That's definitely like, I guess, a piece of advice I'd give myself too. I'm definitely like your example of, I'm just going to pick up the rock myself instead of try to use a dolly. I resonate with that very, very heavily. So, Ben, this has been, I always get super energized talking to folks like you because you've been in the trenches, you're continue to be in the trenches. And you have this like such holistic and, I'm trying to find the right word for it, but like you just approach things with, like you're able to zoom in and out of what's going on so seamlessly. And I think the best operators in the world, like that's the superpower. You're able to go super tactical, but then pull yourself out and be super strategic. And very few people I think a lot of people think they can do that, but very few people actually can. I think you're one of those people that actually can. So I appreciate you so much for taking some time today, on your birthday, no less, to chat with us. This has been such a fun conversation. I hope next time I'm out in SoCal, I will hit you up. I try to get out there quite a bit. And just generally, like, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's been a great conversation. It's been great to share my story, and hopefully I helped some of those people out there that are listening to this. And if anyone wants to get in touch, we're open. We do it all. We service clients. I can be a mentor, whatever you want. I'm always open to having a conversation with people.
Sweet. We'll get your website and your contact information in the show notes. Ben, thank you so much. And we shall see you all next time on Design to Convert.